Hi, I'm Helen. Welcome to Stories from the Art Room. In my last episode, I spun tales about mysterious islands, numinous places that suddenly appear, shimmering in mists, and then vanish out of reach. Legendary isles that enable a covert ingress or loophole into a springtime orchard where sprites and spirits reside. Today, I continue on this theme with a description of one such ephemeral paradise I've envisioned for my stories, an island I'm calling Prokonessos. Also, I admit to deploying artistic license for removing the island from the Sea of Marmaris to the Ionian Sea. Approaching the sunset on the Corfu ferry, your first impression of this isle would resemble the rising rump of a fat black cat, forepaws stretching to scratch a sizzling horizon, its bum topped off with Aphrodite's broken pillared, "Hi sailor, look out." Waking on your first morning there, the powdery sparkle in the air would have you wondering if you'd ever grow immune to its enchantment, since you'd keep being surprised at street corners enough to post shots of idyllic stucco shapes stacking up from the harbour. Then as you walk by one of the Art Deco villas on Gibbesmoon Drive, you'd almost hear the echo of gramophone, evoking bright young things flopping into deck chairs after snorting cocaine, chased by champagne. The romantic allure would have you fantasising a post-lottery life, but before all the sweet bedazzle of the island got to your cavities, I'd advise you to consider Thomas More's literary joke. Utopia means no place. The island I've conjured in my writing is almond-shaped, about 20 kilometres long. In 1749, I have it a certain Anthony Neville Boothby, the Earl of Purbeck, installed his mistress there, a Mrs. Nellie Regina Foxhouse. And while he stayed with her, he planted an exotic arboretum for her delight. But it was the entrepreneurial Nellie who had the foresight to create a pleasure garden along the lines of Vauxhall Gardens within this arboretum on Prokonessos. Since I want to keep with the mystical traditions of such mysterious islands, so it must be a place of fruit and flowers. Nellie created her pleasure garden after the Earl returned home. She did so in a bid to maintain her lifestyle, emulating the wealth-generating tourist attraction precedent set by a former owner of Prokonessos, a Bronze Age queen called Chrysothemis, who, in thanks for her good fortune in escaping her murderous brother, dedicated a grotto within the island's labyrinthine caves to Persephone, goddess of the underworld, so pilgrims might visit the island to make offerings, consult an oracle, and thereby supplement the income the Queen derived from growing saffron. Vauxhall Gardens is now lost, but it's still regretted as a place of cultivating, exhilarating spectacle, which once graced London. I expect you've heard of Vauxhall Gardens. It's been used as an intriguing nighttime venue for many novelists. For some 2 centuries, until it was at last outshone by music halls and circuses and shut down in 1859, Vauxhall Gardens was a social magnet for Londoners and tourists seeking diverting entertainment in a dreamlike garden of visual arts and music. Situated on the south bank of the meandering River Thames, just over a mile due south of Westminster, which interests me as a writer because it had some of the elements of a magical island, as in its day most people arrived there by boat. A ride of 20 to 50 minutes, depending on the wind and tide, and ferrymen could be hired at any of the main landing stages in Westminster or the city. The main attraction Vauxhall Gardens provided was as a rural retreat where people came to listen to songbirds, especially nightingales. How poignant is that? There was also bird imitators, acrobats, and food and drink, which was served in cabins or arbours in the woods. Some form of illumination was provided early in its history, and the gardens was seen as a venue for romantic assignations, and ladies of easy virtue wore masks. The gardens evolved in the early 1600s from a rural tavern, perhaps a venue for bear baiting, with supper and music in a garden setting for 6 pennies a head. People ate their meals in the bodies of old coaches and within the hulks of ships' boats swung between trees and fastened by strong cords. Over time, the venue was developed by owner-manager Johnathan Tyers into a dynamic commercial site of mass entertainment with domes, rotundas, concert rooms and orchestras, and snug boxes for dining, covered promenades and other fairy enchantments, with fireworks, balloon riding and masquerade balls. It was so innovative, since up until those days only aristocrats had access to court society and entertainments. But in these outdoor garden rooms, a burgeoning metropolis could indulge in consuming, civilizing amusements where all levels of society mingled. From King Charles II, who used to bring his ladies there in his brigantine or pleasure yacht, to any member of the general public with pretensions to fashion that had the small price of the admission fee. This famously included the diarist Samuel Pepys, who recorded many a merry time there. If we were to travel back to the early 1700s, we'd see Vauxhall Gardens as a boom town anarchic, youthful, smelly and dirty place with alarmingly violent male-orientated amusements based on cruelty to animals. But it was also a tumultuous and thrilling kaleidoscope of shows and refreshments that came alive at night. On my version of the island called Prokonessos, the pleasure garden is called Mount Palisades Gardens. And unlike Vauxhall, it has continued to innovate commercially and so still entices day trippers who now can visit the gorgeously flowered garden rooms inspired by the famous Sissinghurst Castle Gardens at Sissinghurst in the Weald of Kent in England, which was created in the 1930s by Vita Sackville West, a poet and writer, and her husband, Harold Nicolson, author and diplomat. As Nellie Foxhouse strove to provide civilised adult playtime in her Mount Palisades Gardens on Prokonessos, she accepted it would never be a wholly innocent place of fun. She never intended it to be, and felt it naive to expect otherwise. For the demi-monde have always been welcomed to these gardens. Today, as a matter of expediency, Mount Palisades Gardens would make available a drug testing service for trippy high flyers who don't trouble to check the burn content of their stash. Nellie's savvy publicity honed an image that suggested her gardens were a dream-like heaven, and perhaps that's an overstatement. Perhaps that's a dishonest overstatement of product. Her strategy was to take her cue from the god of good timing, the auspicious Kyrios, mischance, and come a midsummer's night in her gardens, even amongst those who'd never heard of Kyrios, they feel some presiding force was favouring the hunt for a life-changing event. In a malleable electric moment right now, the reincarnation of spirit, a gateway, if you will, raising a curtain on the extraordinary. The buzz Prokonessos visitors get when they arrive on the arches trailing with flowers in a promenade of anticipation. The glimpse over people's heads of a glittering pleasure dome of fun before their bodies surge forward in a riptide of fantasy extravagance. In Mount Palisades Gardens, you would people watch tribes, carnival tribes, in underwear constructions, period costume aficionados in confusing ornamental textures, and those going for the edgy contemporary statement. Everything from minuscule rayon-satin zebra budgies to bungled overspends with quite a few punters, to the gardens unrecognisable from their normal life, preferring to take a holiday from their everyday persona. As they strut their stuff, their noses would be hooked by the aromas wafting from supper boxes alongside the walkways, where tables are laden with lobster, cold salads, syllabubs, and cheesecakes. You need to watch out in case a juggler, say, slams into you, as they may have feather fingers that work for unearned change. The cacophony would be deafening. The soundtrack of this place works to smother dying from an overly exciting life. Then passing through a hedgerow, you might get goosed by mechanical choking devices spurting jets of water up your legs. Or, if you drift away through the trees via a sandy path to a parterre for gentler experiences, you can enjoy there the scent of flowers labelled jonquils, gillyflowers, and exotic raspberry. Mount Palaces has mineral waters, fountains dotted about, where thirsty revellers can sample the efficacious sparkling water that bubbles up from a subterranean spring. And if their curiosity is piqued, they can pay a guide to descend to a natural cistern within the island's mountain and enter a labyrinth hewn out in antiquity. As I mentioned earlier, this font was made famous by Queen Chrysothemis, who in antiquity was the inaugurator of a necromantian built in honour of Persephone, goddess of the underworld, whose oracle pilgrims flocked to consult. And this oracle of the dead on Prokonessos is the subject of my next episode. So bye until then.